I'm Lori Hanau, and I'm going to just start us off by giving us a little top level context. And then from there, we'll have a bit of Sunitha's story, and then a little bit of my story. And then from there, we're going to open it up and have a collective conversation. And so we are just so glad to greet you all and welcome, Larry. It's so good to have you here. Hi. Mwah. And oh, great. And so I'd like to start. I know Sunitha and I would both like to start together. And it's been such a joy to work with Sunitha. We'll say a little bit more about our relationship later. But certainly I think it's so appropriate to start by thanking the earth and also the mystery of creation. And I thought it could be really great, along with then thanking, of course, Coalesce, the Venture Cafe Global for hosting us here, for this great idea of bringing us all together for this Earth Day celebration. And never the 50th anniversary, and never has it felt more important for us to gather for the Earth and for each other. And so let's just take 1 minute to just settle in and breathe together. And I would love to guide us or offer us, invite us to begin by breathing in gratitude and prayer for the earth and for all of the earth's creatures. And so let's just take a minute and just breathe together and give gratitude and send a prayer of thanks to the earth and all her creatures. And then in the last few seconds, breathing with everyone here in the space, for those that we know and those we have yet to meet, but we've all been called here together for this precious time. So just shine gratitude out into this group, thinking of us as a circle, feeling the presence of the person to your right and to your left, and the support and the power and the potential of this circle. And with one final nice, juicy, slow breath, just breathe and smile.
Oh, that was beautiful, Lori. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so Sunitha and I want to just bring awareness to a larger movement that we feel we're all a part of. And there's probably many names for it, but we think of it as the humanistic movement that is taking place and that is impacting the future of work, future of how we work. And so just super top level, I want to name some different elements that are pushing on the system to have us think of, I think, take our own leaps of consciousness into our deeper humanity and into how we work together. And so one aspect that was pushing on the system, I think, even before the virus, is the millennials as a generation, and the fact that the millennials has the largest subgroup of any generation in our human history of people who care about purpose in the workplace. And the leap we've had of social entrepreneurs and mission-based businesses, so all over the world, that the change of entrepreneurialism, systems thinking, that we have more and more capacity to grasp the local to systems dynamics And this is a consciousness that has definitely been growing in our capacity to hold the systems complexity in the past decade or so has taken a huge leap. I found even McKinsey, a consulting, an international consulting company, I read a research paper that they put out last year saying that the next 100 years of work is the leap from the mechanistic way of being together for the last 100 years into living systems as the way we relate within our workplaces in the next 100 years. And they actually named sharing leadership and servant leadership as two of the practices within culture building. You have the Business Roundtable, which is an association of US CEOs who, at the end of last year, put out a statement changing their allegiance from shareholders to stakeholders, including employees and the communities that are touched by the businesses. Certainly B Corps and so much of a movement around compassion and leading with love and kindness and caring and dignity that's going on. Indigenous wisdom, how Indigenous leaders are stepping up and what kind of an impact that's having on a humanistic, this humanistic movement. And somebody that I studied with, Thich Nhat Hanh, who again, I love. I was actually in a space with him when he said that the next Sangha, or excuse me, the next guru is the Sangha or the community. And so this leap from individual into collective consciousness. And these are just some of the different aspects of systems change and consciousness that are going on that have us in this growth. And certainly the virus is having us met so many more people realize that interconnectedness is not just an esoteric term, but a very real way of being. And also we're getting a much greater systems education. So before I say any more, anybody else have anything to say about any systems impact that's a part of this humanistic movement and this movement of shifting how we think about the future of work? Well, pop it into the chat if you have anything more to add. Please, let's use the chat down below here. And Travis, actually, before I go any farther, I'm just realizing I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with Zoom. And is there anything more that you want to point out for us on Zoom? Travis is helping us with our tech tonight. He's a member of the GRTL team.
Thanks, Lori. I think a couple things to notice. On the bottom of your screen, there's a place that says reactions. And there you can have a clapping reaction, you can have a thumbs up reaction. Those are ways to engage and show, excitement or agreement without necessarily having to put anything in chat or unmute yourself. And also in chat, there should be a place where you can raise your hand, or you can type into chat a question that you might have or a comment that you might want to make. And as we're going through tonight, if we see those things in the chat, that'll allow us to then address them, and we can call on each person and have you either state the question or add some clarity. But I think those are the key things that are helpful for us to be able to engage with each other, and then for us to be able to see if you have questions or comments you want to share.
Beautiful. And Sebastian, would you wave your hand too? Sebastian's also here supporting us tonight. And really, again, like Sunitha and I were talking about how important it is that we're here in practice together, collective practice, and supporting each other. And we have a saying that we are always committed to leaving the space for the better for having been together. And so we want to invite you into this idea and into this collective practice. And so we want to bring awareness to building this field of consciousness right now in the moment through all of us being together, and how much our presence matters in every moment. And so before I check the chat, I see a comment, but I want to name that this is an internal practice for us, I think, is how we grow in an interconnected way, and how we shift our consciousness into how we work together. And so, Travis, would you mind just putting up the 4 pillars that we want to invite everyone into now that we'll be be touching on more later.
Sure.
But
Can everybody see this okay?
yes, I can see it, Travis.
Great.
Looks good.
Would you like me to move to the first one, Lori?
Please, thank you so much. And so this is leading with our humanity. So this is really about leading relationally before positionally. So in the workplace and really all over in society, we often introduce ourselves through our roles. And this is a shift of consciousness in the practice of leading humanistically by recognizing and meeting as equals in our humanity before we relate through role, status, and expertise. Would you name bring up the second pillar, please? Thank you. The second is the equality. So we are all learning partners here tonight, as Helen named and Sierra named, and that we relate as equal learning partners in full acknowledgement of what we can contribute and learn from each other. And this is a huge practice, a huge shift of consciousness in how most workplaces are currently set up. Wholeness. We are fully ourselves wherever we are, and that we are also aware of the relationship and impact of ourselves to any group or team that we're a part of, any group or team or family to our mission, and then that to all of the world, and then to all of life. So again, this nested systems thinking, but also being whole in ourselves to bring our fullness into our workplace and into our time together tonight. and the fourth pillar is our collective wisdom, that we know more together than any one of us does on our own, and that our collective wisdom is made up of our innate natural gifts and talents that each of us were born with. And so thank you so much, Travis. We'll turn off the screen share. And again, just to be aware of these pillars and to consider them as we are in presence together right now for the rest of our time. And then Sunitha, I am going to, oh yes, and Charles, thank you. I'm sure hopefully you'll have a chance to speak in a moment, but we definitely want to name the ESGs and the Sustainable Development Goals in the mix. Thank you for bringing those forward. And so Sunitha.
Yeah. Hi. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight and kind of making the time. I know we're starting at kind of 6 in the evening. I know everyone's days are a little wonky right now, a little all over the place, and time kind of blends into itself. So, thanks for kind of coming out to chat with us tonight. It's nice to see some familiar faces from Marlborough. So there's many Marlborough alum on the chat tonight, which is really fun to see. So Marlborough is how Lori Hanau and I met. I studied in the MBA for Managing for Sustainability program, graduated a few years ago, and many of the folks here were either professors, classmates, advisors at different times, so it's really kind of fun to be together with the group. But I think Lori's pillar is really kind of a beautiful intro into what we have really spent a lot of time talking about the last few days, which is this conversation that everyone kind of seems to be having around what is the future of work. Like, I think it's so top of mind at so many people's different arenas, their different sectors, their different industries. I feel like I've had 1,000 conversations already with friends who are like, well, what will work look like when we come back from this? Do we all just go back to 9 to 5s? Like, does it make sense? How many of us go completely remote? How many of us, there's just 1,000 questions, I think, in particular around work that are emerging out of what's going on with coronavirus. And it's really putting some of these ideas kind of we came to, so referencing those sustainable development goals, we're talking about economic empowerment, and we came to this talking about shared leadership, and kind of in this new completely raw kind of context, like what do those things start to look like, and kind of what structures can they start to form into. I think a friend of mine and I were talking the other day about how neither of us thought we'd ever kind of live through a global kind of foundation shaking event like this, right? Like, you think about, oh, what would it be like if kind of things went totally pear-shaped and we have to reinvent kind of how we do things? And that's, happening now in our lifetime in a completely unignorable way. And I think that's just kind of leaving some really interesting ground there for what comes next. What do we dream into existence next? And so, to give a little bit more background on me, so I was born in Canada. I grew up in California. I've been living in New York for 10 years now. 11, actually, maybe like 11 years now. I'm losing track. I think I've become a legitimate New Yorker. But I have spent different time in my career working at nonprofits, working in the manufacturing sector, kind of working in supply chain roles, and had really been looking in that bounce back and forth. I was trying to kind of find my balance and find my blend, and that was what led me ultimately to the MBA program at Marlboro. I was looking to continue this, business career path I was on, these supply chain roles I was progressing through, but I really wanted to understand how do we, like, from the systems, from the ground up, how do you really design supply chain work even in a way that brings kind of values to life, that kind of centers people and impact and communities as a guiding kind of north star for how you operate. And I was looking for that, and Marlboro was this incredible place. It was teaching kind of exactly that in a really holistic way. And so that experience, I think, for me really especially kind of grounded this idea of shared leadership, of engaging people who are impacted by your work in the nature of what you were doing, that it's absolutely an imperative if you're a mission-based business to be thinking about how are my key stakeholders impacted. So I work at the Grayson Bakery in Yonkers, New York. So for those of us who haven't heard of us, we've been in business for over 30 years. We are a food manufacturing site making primarily ice cream baked inclusions. So we make the brownies for Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and have been doing so for 30 years as well. So in my role there, I'm our director of supply chain. So I manage our relationship, own our relationship with Ben and Jerry's and Unilever. Been at the bakery for 7 years, and also direct kind of all of our fun supply chain activities. So all that good stuff like inventory management and purchasing and everything else that comes along with that. So that's kind of my role there. But Grayson being kind of the company that it is, and it's kind of a small place where you get the opportunity to wear a lot of hats. It's a very kind of family style operation in many ways, and it's given me the opportunity to get involved in their B Corp activities and designing kind of impact initiatives, working on community level work, which has been a really exciting way to kind of see some of these real principles we're talking about come to life in exactly that way. Kind of I had been excited to see, like, what does it really look like when you make that the grounding factor. So at Grayson, what's kind of different about how we do things, and we were founded by a Zen Buddhist monk named Bernie Glassman in 1982. And Bernie was an aerospace engineer who found Zen Buddhism while living in LA and became the first North American Zen Buddhist master, kind of trained in starting his own schools in the United States. And so he established a student community in Riverdale, which is one town over from Yonkers. And he started to see Southwest Yonkers over his time there. And for those who don't know, Yonkers is actually the fourth largest city in New York State, but flies very much under the radar in a way, and has been, one of the poorest communities in Westchester County for some time now. And much of that the result of very intentional kind of predatory tactics by the city of Yonkers to kind of create pockets of poverty and pockets where Black residents and Hispanic residents were kind of isolated and contained in these areas, and that kind of spawned what Southwest Yonkers is today. And that's the community Bernie encountered, and he wanted to do something about it through the means that he had. That was really come out of his Zen Buddhist principle of take a right action. If you see something wrong, take a right action. So the community he was hosting of students, they had a bakery that was essentially just providing them with an income, allowing them to kind of carry on their educational activities. So he started hiring people he would meet around Southwest Yonkers into this bakery. So he would walk around, he would meet someone who was homeless, he would meet someone who was having substance use issues, whatever it was, he would say, hey, do you need a job? Would bring them into the bakery, hire them, train them there, get them certified, all these kinds of things, and kind of send them on their way. And so that's ultimately how we still hire today at Grayston. So we have a job list at the front door. If you're interested in working in a line staff position, you sign your name on the list. First come, first serve. We need people, our sales grow or our volume fluctuates, whatever that is. We kind of bring a class in, we take you through an apprenticeship, and we kind of bring you along into full-time employment. And so, the model is really all about kind of creating access to employment, kind of really removing any barrier that some folks have had in the community to kind of get their feet underneath them, find employment, and kind of find that stability as they're trying to kind of put lives back together or find a new path or whatever it might be. I mean, If you've read about us, I think a lot of things written about Grayson kind of focus on the angle of folks who have been incarcerated previously. And while that's certainly like a portion of the population who's working at the bakery, there's barriers of all kinds. So, single mothers who have trouble finding hours that work when they're trying to take care of five kids, then there's people who are like first time immigrants into the country and English is a second language, like kind of all these different barriers pop up for people as they're kind of going through a job hunt. And Grayson kind of removes all of those items and gives them an opportunity kind of wherever they're starting from. So there's an element fundamentally in there that is about empowerment, that is about just kind of removing this blockade from a group who has not had a chance to participate and has given them that opportunity. So I think there is something just very pure about like that idea of kind of opening the door. And there's a number of things we kind of do at the bakery to bring that even more to life. Like, so this idea of, okay, so you've had this opportunity now, like what does it mean to thrive there? So for instance, one of the things I work on, which I like to call at this point is like a cultural exchange program, is an annual employee swap with Ben and Jerry's. So, we've been working with Ben and Jerry's for 30 years, but like let's keep it real. They're our customer, we're a supplier. There are certain expectations and a lot that we are living up to in that relationship. It is there's certainly a power dynamic at play, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but we are the supplier in that role, and you're always trying to look your best right in front of a customer who means so much to you. So the employee swap, which when I first proposed to my GM that we were going to implement, he honestly looked at me like I had three heads. But the employee swap is like you essentially bring a team of Grayson employees up to Vermont for a week. They work at Ben and Jerry's. They make ice cream on the plant floor. They hang out with the employees. We work on community events together. We go out to dinner together. And so our team gets to kind of experience all things Vermont, all things Ben and Jerry's. And then they send a team down to Yonkers, and we let them work on the bakery floor. They volunteer with us, they partner with us, they come out to eat with us. So my boss, essentially, as you would imagine, the idea of bringing your biggest customer onto the floor to work next to you and kind of see for hours at a time what the operation looks like is stressful. You're really kind of putting yourself in a vulnerable position to say, okay, we're fully transparent here. You're going to see what a regular day at the bakery kind of looks like. And for anyone who's had the pleasure of being in food manufacturing, just all the many things that can happen throughout a day that are a challenge and kind of a fire that needs to be put out and kind of force the team to kind of get on your feet and find solutions and move forward. It's a very fast paced, kind of exciting environment in that way, but it certainly brings with it its challenges. So to kind of think of it in that context, in the midst of that, you're trying to execute a model that's about empowering and engaging an employee base, that it might be their first time in employment. They might have had a really history of trauma with poverty, whatever those other, racial systemic barriers that they've had to deal with. They're bringing all of that trauma kind of in with them. There's family issues, there's substance issues, there's all the other factors that are going on during the day, and you're kind of trying to execute these things. So just circle really quick back to the swap and kind of finish what that is. But I'll say when you do this swap, what I found to be really exciting, and I think this is really for me like a fundamental piece of what Grayson does, is it turned into a cultural exchange. And I say that because I would have these conversations with the Ben and Jerry's employees afterwards, or with their HR managers afterwards, and say, okay, like how was the trip for people? What did they think? And repeatedly they would say, this employee thought this whole model of yours was ridiculous. Like there was no way you could successfully operate a bakery this way. Like they thought, why would you maintain this supplier as your one brownie supplier? And then they came down to the bakery and they worked with a team, and there was just a curtain kind of dropped was there, where people suddenly saw each other as people. They're talking about families, they're connecting about their life goals, about where they've traveled. Like they're having this shared experience where the Vermonters are completely blown away by Yonkers. And as some of my deep Vermonters know, they're just baffled by like the size and breadth of Yonkers. And then you have our team who's like, I've never seen a farm before. Like, what is this? Like, what is all this just open land they live in? Like, I don't understand. So it just became this incredible way where people saw each other as just people first. And suddenly we had employees back at Ben and Jerry's telling other people like, oh my gosh, like open hiring is the best thing. Like, I don't understand why everybody's not doing it. Like this bakery is incredible. They're a company just like us. They're about the community. They're about values. It just became this really kind of amazing experience now year over year, where people are taking away this kind of cultural experience of working side by side with someone you never would have expected to. And I think that really is like the power of Grayston. Like I look at my day and, I used to work in the nonprofit world, and in that environment, there's very much like a provider client power dynamic going on. So when you were interacting, with folks at the homeless shelter, say where I worked for a couple of years, you're the provider. You're like, here's the program you have to follow, and here's the incentives along the way, and this is what the city mandates. Like, there's not a genuine relationship in some ways that you can have with that kind of bureaucratic barrier in the middle. And I think at Grayston, it's very different. These are my colleagues. These are teammates. I'm not offering something to them that like they're waiting for. There's none of that like energy in the room or that idea in the room. It's just, no, like you're a baker on the floor. We have to hit this order by Friday. Like, what's going on? Are the boxes packed? Like, are they labeled? Like, we're not having conversations of that matter. We're having conversations like colleagues, like one to another. So I think there's really something there that's kind of exceptional in the way we get to see each other over time. So I'm gonna pause there a little bit. Any questions, reactions, thoughts, like before I just kind of said a whole mouthful. So
Sunitha, I dropped a question into the chat. I was wondering how you thought of that idea. It sounds amazing, and I was just wondering how it came to you.
oh, this was definitely not my idea. So this was definitely Bernie Glassman when he started kind of that hiring practice that he was doing way, way back in the day and in the 1980s in Yonkers. That's just that practice continued over the years. And Bernie was heavily involved with the bakery up until the time, I started in 2013, and he was still visiting the bakery on like a biannual basis, kind of meeting with senior management, meeting with the board. He very much had his kind of fingerprints over everything we were doing. And he was a huge advocate of this idea of roundtable leadership and these ideas of like continuing to find ways to empower the team. But open hiring was really essentially, it was really born out of his belief in this right action and just taking that right action he saw in front of him. It's like, I have a bakery, I can give you a job, like, let's do that. And like, we'll figure out what happens afterwards. But, Bernie was very much like it's fine, just take the step and then some things will happen and you'll roll with those things. Like, I very much see, having had the pleasure of like meeting Ben and Jerry of Ben and Jerry's over the years, I see how the two of them and Bernie were very much like, they were a soul connection between the three of them. They really saw things the same way, just jump in and go big or go home. So.
And Sunitha, I'm thinking, and everyone, Sunitha and everyone, I'm thinking, I can't believe it, but we have less than 15 minutes left. And I think that we get bounced like right back in at that time. So, Sunitha, thank you so much for all you've named. There's so much that's here. I almost like don't even want to share my part because there's so much here. So what I'm going to do, everyone, is I'm going to share just a touch of my story, because I think it was, just so important for you to hear what we heard from Sunitha. And I want to show, and then we'll open it up. So I'll just take about 5 minutes and give you a little bit more of the framework of shared leadership, and use the chat away, and then we'll open it up. I do want to say that we have a gift, GRTL. We have a gift for you of a manifesto that that speaks to the future of work and to a vision that we have, that anybody that may be interested in having this gift, please just put your name and email in the chat. I thought maybe we'd read it, but we'll see what we have time for, because I'd rather get everybody's voices in. And so I just want to say that I founded Global Roundtable Leadership back in 2002. I had a huge growth spurt of consciousness, just a growth spurt in myself, for about 3 years previous. And I was the only child in our family out of 4 that worked within my dad's company for 10 years before that. And he was a very rare leader. And he was a leader that was all about sharing power and leading humanistically. And I was also in sales. And when I was in and out of all these other companies for 10 years and saw these cultures that were so different from our culture, I thought, why is our culture kind of like this Camelot? What makes it so hard to have these cultures where the genius is honored throughout the organization, where rest and and how you build trust and play with each other is so deeply valued, and that you lead. The genius can come from all parts of the whole system. And I will say that some of my framework is definitely influenced by the 10 years that I worked for my father. And then also I went on to become president and chief operating officer of another manufacturing company, and it was the opposite end. And so I'm not going to say more about that now, but just how much I learned by also the fear-based thinking and the scarcity thinking, and how burned out I was after just 2 years. And but I also want to name the earth, because a lot of this framework has come when I've sat out in reflection and taken walks and really listened, and shared leadership was whispered into my ear, and the pillars came into my body on a walk. And so I do want to name that. And I want to say that at Global Roundtable Leadership, we work across the sectors. And so for-profits, not-for-profits, and NGOs. And I had a co-op tell me once, Lori, we're calling you because here we are, we're in a cooperative, a worker-owner cooperative, but we all come from hierarchies. And we don't know how to act differently. Like, even though we have these values, we don't know how to be different in our behavior with each other, because we've been so conformed through hierarchical ways of working and giving our power away to each other, and having power over and under each other versus with each other. And so I'm just going to show, Travis, if you would put up the slides, I'm going to show 3 things. I'm going to show our premises, which is this leap out of hierarchical thinking into how we share leadership and share power. And then I'm going to show the definition of shared leadership, and then we're going to just touch on those pillars again, and then open it up for a conversation to see what any inspiration, ideas, what surprised you about what Sunitha and I are offering, what your own questions and ideas are around the future of work. So we'll use our last 5 minutes for that time. So leading with a strength-based approach, and I'm not going to even give these a lot of explanation. I'm just going to dose you in this consciousness. And Travis, I'm going to have us move pretty quickly here. Thank you so much. And so we approach leadership relationally, not positionally. So this one is how we are leading our lives in every moment, in all that we do and all the choices that we make. We also believe that the genius is always first and foremost in the room, that we often look around and look to other people for the answers, and they're right here, right in our bodies, and right in the groups that we work with, first and foremost. We have been, I believe that particularly in our Western society, we have been so bifurcated in our thinking. And so we think of this as the Mobius strip. It's also called the Lemniscate, or the Super 8. The personal development, if you will, is inextricably bound and linked to group wisdom, group development, and to leadership development. These are not broken or fragmented. We believe that how we begin together is crucial, how we share our stories with each other, how we build trust with each other, how we play with each other when we meet, what our values are and our principles, that we have the ways of working together, that how we show up, how our presence is as we show up in the beginning of a meeting. Are we in fight or flight or unconscious, or are we coming from a connected place in ourselves, and how we begin? And then we are committed to building healing environments, that we are extraordinary healers within our own systems, within our own bodies, and that we are committed to co-creating nurturing and nourishing work environments. And that when we do, what is able to come from our creativity and our place of trust and relaxation. And our passion lives here, not our freneticness, but our passion. And then we are shifting from leading as experts to leading as continuous learning partners, or continuous learners. And then we are shifting the organizational paradigm from mechanistic systems to living systems. And we're happy to share these slides with you too, if anyone wants them. Again, just put your name and email in the chat. We're happy to share these with you. I think that's it, right? And so then our definition, and this is a whopper. Is there anyone who'd be willing to read the definition of shared leadership that we offer the world?
I'm happy to read it, Lori.
Beautiful.
The practice of bringing out the greatest capacity in everyone by empowering us all to be responsible for and engaged in the vibrancy and high function of the whole. This is a fundamental shift in how we understand and apply power and leadership.
Thank you, Sunitha. And so often with this definition, when we're going to do a training, we usually stay a year to 2 years with a group. And while they work on shifting their own consciousness and behavior and habits, because shifting power dynamics is a big body of work. And so we'll oftentimes start by putting this against their mission and having a conversation about what resonates and what feels new. And then Travis will just gently slide through the 4 pillars. And we'll just keep sliding. We're just going to take a couple seconds each for our humanity, our equality, our wholeness, and our collective wisdom. And so these are the beginning of a framework that we offer groups to have a language. And we have other practices that we also offer, but then usually groups will take this on and make it their own in their own languages, and it sparks them into their own practices. And so we'll with the precious 5 minutes we have left, we'll open this up and see if anybody has anything you want to say at all, any questions, any comments.
Hey, Sunitha and Lori. I'm Dan from Nova Scotia. Thanks very much for the talks. I just kind of have a question for Sunitha. I'm wondering if there's like what the rate of employees like staying over, like whether there's a turnover rate for employees or whether people really like to stay on within the roles that they're in.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Hi, Dan. So we have kind of a mix of both. So we certainly have kind of a core of team members who are in kind of supervisory or lead roles or certain kind of specialties throughout the bakery that have been with us for a fair amount of time. So for instance, if any of you are interested, so it's the Greyston Bakery is our name. So it's GREYSTON. So GreystonBakery.com is our site. Oh, sorry, this is my son, Theo. You know, Grace, yeah, hold on.
I gotta tell you something.
Sorry, you
Daddy
okay?
said bum bum poo.
Okay, well, that's great, guys. And that's life with a 4-year-old. Like,
Yes, that's a part of our wholeness. It's our
Right?
families.
My life right now.
Who isn't relating right now?
All day.
I just go up for that.
All day.
I love that.
But so we certainly kind of have this core group, and then we definitely have folks who kind of might stay with us for anywhere from like 3 months to 6 months to 9 months. You know, we in the apprenticeship that happens kind of early on. So in the first 6 to 10 months, you can be an apprentice. The attrition rate is certainly higher, but much of that is by design. So that's kind of you're under pretty like rigorous evaluation at that point. There's a weekly assessment going on. We're looking at your ability to kind of work with the team, kind of learn these technical tasks, all these different things. I mean, we're still kind of in the world of food manufacturing. So all the regulations and safety guidelines that apply to anybody else apply to Greyston. So you need to make sure your employees can follow GMPs, that our HACCP plan is placed and documented correctly. All of these things still have to be in place. So you have to kind of really be dedicated to bringing this team who's like, you might not know anything about food manufacturing. You're just going to get a fire hose of information, and we're kind of going to bring you along and kind of like mentor you through this and see if we can get you there. I think one of the things we do to really kind of help with that attrition rate is we formed a partnership with a group called Westchester Jewish Community Services, who's a local social service agency to us. They're the largest provider in Westchester. And we co-fund a staff member now who sits on site as the on-site care coordinator at Greyston. So any kind of emerging issue going on for an employee, like if it's a housing issue, if it's a childcare issue, if it's, I have a substance issue, I want to go to rehab, the care coordinator is on site to kind of have that conversation with them in the moment, connect them to services, and kind of keep that relationship confidential. So it's been a really powerful way to kind of address some of these areas in a person's life that typical employers, you're not thinking about getting involved. You're thinking about, okay, like we'll send you to like you know, the employee helpline or your ADP hotline, and like, yeah, they're going to give you some phone number for something else. But like for us, it was really kind of an imperative, like bring it in house. So that was available immediately to kind of help people pass these really like pressing issues to keep coming into work.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I think we have like seconds before we're pulled back.
Yeah, right. I think so.
So, definitely find us. Please find us. I know that they're setting up ways to find us if you want to for any reason at all. And as we go into the rest of tonight together, and as we step out into the world from here. May this spark you into thinking about the kind of workplace you want to have, or what's one action that you want to take to shift your workplace in ways where we may not want to go back to old ways of being, and what would be one practice that you'd bring to the table? And yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
So much.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Well,
This is
any
such
other
like a feeling
questions
of
or comments?
suspense.
We have a moment.
Yeah.
We can also just breathe.
Yeah. Happy Earth Day, or belated.
Right.
I just want to say real quickly how impressed I am with Sunitha. I've known Sunitha from grad school, and I am just like, I want you to be CEO of any company. Like, just please, you need to be the CEO somewhere. I'm so, the way you see things and the way you articulate your story right now, it's a new level. I'm so blessed to have seen you on this journey, Sunitha, of leadership.
Oh, thank you very much, Julie. I appreciate that. Thank you.
In front of a lot of Marlboro people here.
Thank you. I love it. It's really is such a nice treat to see so many of us. Like, it's been a long time, and it's been one of those treats, right? Of this whole pandemic is kind of suddenly seeing people you haven't seen in such a long time, getting that FaceTime. So this has been really wonderful. Nope, it looks like we've got our countdown now. We've got 20 seconds. So.
Does your son have any final words?
I think he's engrossed in an animal show again. So I've safely re-engaged him with a screen.